Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take the XR rig that we did in the last tutorial and we're going to turn it from this into this. If you have ever smacked your hand so hard into a wall or a table while you were in VR, hit that like button for me, gently. It really helps the channel out and I really appreciate you guys. So without further ado, let's jump into it. We're going to start by creating a new 3D project. I'm going to call mine VR Hand Animation Tutorial. We've got our default scene. Now I'm gonna go through real quick and set up the XR rig just like we did on the last video. So if you haven't seen the last video yet, I definitely recommend going to watch it up there. And after you've watched that, come back to this video. There we go. All right, now we're set up just like we were in the last video. We've got our XR rig, everything's been installed. And then when we put the headset on, we should be able to go through the scene and do everything. So let's just try this out real quick to make sure everything's working. And just like we'd expect, we have the laser pointers that we can move around. All right, so now what? We want to be able to see our hands. We want to be able to move our hands, animate them, everything like that. First thing we need is a hand model, and you can get a free one on Oculus's website. We're just going to Google Oculus hands. You'll see this first one here, developer oculus.com, and you can download a Oculus hand model here. Right there, it'll come in a zip, and then inside of here you'll get 2 MB files, which can only be opened if you have a Maya license, the Maya 3D software, but I have the converted FBX version on my Patreon and it's free on the Patreon. You don't have to sign up or anything. Just follow the link in the description and you can download the hand models, the left and right ones there. We need to add the model to the project. So I'm going to create a folder, call this models. For this project, there's only gonna be one model in here. I'm actually only going to use the left hand model. So I'm gonna drag that in there. And then here we've got the left hand version. Now I want to add the left hand to the left-hand controller, and then we're going to add the left hand to the right-hand controller also. We're going to rename the right-hand controller to right hand, and then you can see here we have this model, and it's exactly the same because the left hand and the right hand are overlaid on each other. So in order to fix this, we're going to go click on the right hand and then scale it to a -1 on the x-axis. And there, now you'll have a left and a right hand. So from here, you can actually play and the hands will follow the controller. Because they're parented, the hands will follow the controllers, but if you notice, the hand is not in the right orientation or position. And of course, when we press the buttons, nothing happens. First, we're going to fix the orientation and then we'll work on animating. For simplicity's sake, we're going to disable the right hand and just work on the left hand here. Now the x-axis is the forward facing, and if you noticed, the hands were like this, but we need them to be like this. So it was a 90-degree turn along the x-axis. Should be facing in now, okay. And then we're gonna disable the ground plane just so I can see this better. That is where the pivot point is going to be. And when you pivot, you normally pivot around your wrist area right here. So we're gonna try to move up the position just a tad. Now in order to line this up, I'm going to lock the hand model, but then I'm going to click on the left hand controller so that we can see that pivot point where the left hand controller is actually going to be. Now you need to make sure that you are in pivot mode for the rotation so that you can see where the actual axis of pivot is. So now in order to line up the left hand and the controller, we're going to click on the left hand, lock that in the inspector. So now this isn't going to change. And then we click on left hand controller and that allows us to see the pivot point for the left hand controller. And so we want to line up this axis with the palm of the model. So now we'll be rotating around the palm, which is what your hand normally does. And let's enable the ground again. Unlock the inspector, enable the ground, and let's try this out, see if our left hand is lined up. And a good way to do this is you hold your hand where you think the hand is, and if it doesn't quite line up, then you know you gotta move it a little bit. You can kind of flip off and like see where your hand is in real life versus reality, and if it doesn't line up, then you know you got some work to do. So I want to move it back towards the wrist a little bit, which means the pivot point needs to move up. And then maybe towards the pinky just a tad. It's kind of hard to do in VR because like your whole head is encompassed. All right, let's try this point now. Yeah, that feels much better. So we don't have to go through that process again for the right hand. We can just right click on this transform, click on copy component. We're gonna unlock it from the inspector. Then we're gonna go to the right hand. We can re-enable the right hand, right click and then paste component values. And then we're gonna have to flip the x-axis, but then we're also going to have to flip the Z rotation to -90. And then one more thing to flip is the x-axis. So this will have to be a negative as well. So the places you have to flip are the X position and scale, and then the Z axis, and that'll get you oriented to the right hand using the same model. And now they should both line up. So the next step is to actually get the fingers moving. So when I press the button or the trigger, I want the appropriate fingers to move. In order to accomplish this, we're going to need an animator. So let's just keep going on the left hand. Type in animator as a component. And then for the animator, we're going to need an avatar, and then we're going to need a controller. Now the avatar is easy to make. We just click on the model here. Over in the inspector, we're going to go to rig, and then for avatar definition, create from this model. Then clicking apply will generate a avatar for this model. So now we can go back to the left hand, and then when we click on this box here, you'll see the left hand avatar pops up. So we're going to select that, and then we're actually going to do the exact same thing for the right hand. You'll notice that this already got generated. Now we need a controller. So let's go back out into our assets folder, create animator controller. We'll just call this hand animator, and then double clicking on that will bring up the animator tab. So we can't really do anything with this because we still need an animation, and we don't have one of those. The models just came as a mesh, so they don't have any animations with them. So we're going to click on the left hand, and then we're going to open the animation tab, which you can get to by going to window, animation, animation. And then click on this create button to begin animating left hand, create an animation clip, create that. And then you pick where you want to save it. Call this animation close because it's going to be when you close the hand. We're going to go back to scene view so we can actually view this. We're going to uncheck the ground, and we're going to uncheck the right hand because we selected the left hand as an animation. And this is where we actually start to animate the hand. So we're going to add a property. We're going to go into the world inside of the hand, and you'll notice that it has all of the bones. So this is the skeletal structure of the hand. So we're going to start from the bottom, the last joint of the index finger, and then each hand's going to have 2 or 3 different joints. So you can either add properties here based on the selection that you made, or inside of the actual model that we've clicked on, once we hit record. So we're actually going to go to the last frame, hit record, and then any change we make to this model will automatically be added as a property inside of this animation. So let's click on the index, and then a fun fact is if you hold down Alt and hit this down arrow, it will open up all of the subdirectories. Let's start with the first root of the index finger. Press E to open up the rotation tool, and then we want to rotate this finger until it gets to a decent, natural looking closed fist. So we're going for this kind of shape. And then it should be adding the properties down here. And if it's not adding, then you probably don't have the record button pressed, or you're not on the last frame, or you're not further down in the timeline. And we're gonna do that for every single finger. So I'm just gonna go through and make a nice closed pose. All right, there we go, good enough. We're gonna uncheck this record button, and now if you hit play, you should see a kind of natural closing of the fist. So now we have to actually programmatically cause this animation to happen when we press a button. There's actually going to be 2 different animations derived from this animation. So we want the grip animation, which is just going to be 3 fingers. And then we want the trigger animation, which is going to be kind of the top 2, your thumb and index finger. And then you should be able to grip and press the trigger separately or both at the same time. So to do that, we're going to go up to the animator tab, and then it default added this close, but we're going to delete that. and we want to add a couple layer masks. So we're going to right click in our project, create a avatar mask. And this is going to be for the grip. And then inside of the inspector, open up the transform, and then we select the avatar that we want to use, import that skeleton, and then we're going to expand all and then toggle the checkbox off of all of them. And so since this is for the grip, we only want to show 3 fingers. We want to show all of the middle finger joints, all of the pinky joints, and all of the ring finger joints. So this mask will only show the animation for these particular fingers. And we're going to duplicate this by pressing Control D, and then we're going to rename this one to trigger and do the same thing, transform. The skeleton will already be imported, expand all, and then we're going to uncheck all of these and then check all of the index finger ones and all of the thumb joints. Perfect. Now the way we're going to use this is by adding a couple layers. So make sure you're in the animator tab under layers, check this plus button. This is going to be a trigger layer, and then we're going to add a grip layer. Hit this gear icon, bring the weight up to 100, and then this mask is the trigger mask. And then do the same thing for the grip, bring the weight up to 100, and then select the grip mask. We're going to add a couple parameters, and these are the parameters that we're going to call from the code in order to animate the particular mask animation. We're going to add 2 float because the trigger will actually record a float number. It's not just an off or an on. Also the grip records a float number as well. So we're going to add a trigger, and we're going to add a grip. And let's go back into layers, make sure we're on trigger, and then we're going to add an empty state into here. It'll use the default position that the model's in, but it's not going to animate. And then we're going to add a state, a new blend tree, and then make a transition from the default state to the blend tree, and then make another transition back. And the transition, I'm going to click on this to the blend tree transition, and this is only going to happen, we're in the trigger layer, so it's only going to happen when the trigger value is greater than 0.01. And then we're also going to open up the settings tab here and uncheck the has exit time and fixed duration, which means that it will follow the value no matter what. We don't want it to have any kind of so when you press it, we don't want any delay in the fingers being closed. We're gonna go back in the other direction, do the same thing, except for when the trigger is less than 0.01, and then uncheck has exit time and fixed duration. Now we're gonna go into the blend tree, double click, and then just click in the open area, and it'll bring up this blend tree, and we're going to change the blend type to direct, and then we want to add a motion, and the motion is going to be close, and then make sure the parameter is on trigger, and there we go. So now it'll blend the default motion to the close animation based on what the value of this trigger parameter is. So we're going to do the same thing again for the grip. Click on grip, new state, new blend tree, make a transition to, make a transition from, and make sure those are unchecked. Condition is grip is greater than 0.01. This condition is grip is less than. Double click on blend tree. I'm going to make sure this is direct, add a motion field, close, and then make sure this parameter is set to grip. So there we go. That's the animation set up, and you can do this for every single finger if you want. So you could do a layer and a mask and a parameter for each finger instead of the trigger or grip. So you're just gonna have 5 variables instead of the 2 that we have. I mean, for time purposes only, I'm only doing the trigger and the grip, and for these controllers, you only have 2 options as well anyway. If you had the, what was it, the valve index, the knuckle controllers that have a float value for every single finger, you can dynamically adjust specific fingers, which is super cool. I just don't have the tech for it, so not going to do that right now. So we're getting kind of close. I'm gonna make a new folder, clean this up a little bit, called animation. Click on close, shift, click on trigger. That selects all of them and drag them into animation. Now we're gonna create a new folder called scripts, and we're gonna make 2 scripts in order to control the animation. The first script, go into the scripts folder, create script. This script is going to be called hand, and then we're going to make another script called hand controller. So the hand script is going to be attached to every hand that we have in the scene. I'm going to drop this on left hand and drop this on right hand, and we can re-enable the right hand as well. The hand controller, so the hand class is going to handle anything that the hand can do. So gripping, animating, any of that stuff. The hand controller is going to trigger those actions. When a trigger is pressed, the hand controller is going to communicate the trigger press, understand it, and then trigger the appropriate actions from the hand class. This is how I like to set up my scripts, is so you have an object and then you have an object controller, and those are two different things and they go on two different game objects. So the hand controllers are going to go to the left-hand controller and the right-hand controller. So let's open up the hand controller first. So this is your basic template. We're gonna say we want to grab an action-based controller. It's not gonna show up in our IntelliSense because we haven't added the XR interaction toolkit. So we're gonna do that. And then we're also going to want to have a hand, and we're gonna call the hand class that we made. And then inside of the start method, we're going to get that controller. We're gonna wanna require this controller on any game object that has the hand controller class on it. Go up here at the top and say require component type of action-based controller. And then this hand class, we're actually going to want to make public so that we can set it inside of Unity. The update method is going to be super simple. We're just getting the two inputs, the trigger input and the grip input. And those are going to be select for the grip input and action for the trigger input. So the way we're going to do this is we're actually going to call this hand. We're going to call a new method called setGrip, and then get our grip value, controller.selectAction.action.read value, and we want to get that as a float. And then the same thing for the trigger, set trigger. These are methods that we're going to create inside of the hand class in a minute, so they're going to be underlined for the moment. Controller, and this one's going to be activate action, action, read value, and float again. And in order to make these methods, we're going to click on this, press Control period, and that will give us an option to generate the method. And then we're going to do the same thing for trigger, Control period, generate the method. And now we're going to go over here and open up the hand class. Inside the hand class, you'll see that it generated the two methods that we need from the controller class. And so inside of here, we're going to want to animate the hand, and we're going to want to do that kind of smoothly. So we'll have to do some kind of interpolation over a period of time to get it from one position to the next position. First thing is we're going to need an animator class, and we're going to get this in the start method. Animator equals get component animator. And just like the controller, we're going to want to require this animator class. All right, let's set these methods. So when we set a grip, we want to set a grip target to be equal to whatever value is passed. And then same thing for the trigger. We want to set a trigger target equal to the float value that's passed. So we're going to need to make those two values. So do the same control period trick and then just hit enter, and those will be made up at the top. Right now we're inputting the value that we want to put the fingers at, but we're not doing anything at the moment. So we're going to want an animate class. We're going to call this animate hand, just so we don't get confused with any of the pre-built methods. And this one's going to be a void. So if we have a target grip point, then we're also going to want a current grip point, and we're also going to want a current trigger point. Private float current and private float target trigger current. We're going to end up calling this animate hand inside of the update function. We want animate hand to be called every single frame because we're going to set the targets once, but then it's going to take a second or two for that hand to get from the current value to the target value. And so every frame we want that to inch a little bit closer until it gets to that point. And so that's what the animate hand method is going to do. First, we're going to check to see if the target and the current are different, because if they're not, then we don't want to do anything. We don't want to waste any processing power. So if the grip current does not equal the grip target, then we're going to want to animate the hand. First, we're going to do a little interpolation. So we're going to move the target value a little bit closer to the current value, but not all the way, so it doesn't look like we just teleported our fingers into the palm. So we want to just move this just gradually. So the grip current is going to get updated to a little bit closer to the grip target. To do this, we're going to call mathf.moveTowards. And then this will have a current value, a target value, and then a max delta, which is the speed at which you want the interpolation to happen. So current is grip current, target is grip target, and the speed is going to be the time.delta time, and then times a speed value. And we're going to do control period, enter, and that will make a speed float up here, and we're going to make this one public and move that up to the top. And now that we have this little bit interpolated grip current value, we want to animate the hand. In order to do that, we're going to call the values that we made over when we were doing the animator and move those values to whatever the new grip current value is. We're going to reference our animator that we grabbed in the start, and then we're going to set float. And then this method takes two parameters. It's going to be the string value of whatever the parameter is, and then the new value. So the string is grip. That's the name of the variable inside of the animator, which I really don't like that it's strings. And then we're going to set the value, so grip current. And because I really don't want to be working with strings, we're going to take this out and replace it with a animator grip param. We're going to make a new value called animator grip param and change that to grip. So now if we ever go back and change that parameter name, we only have to change it here in one spot. Just in case we end up using grip in multiple places, we can just use this here. It's just keeping our code clean, and the best practice is to try to avoid using strings as much as possible. So the way this works is every frame is going to be reading the value of where those buttons are. So what the float value is, and it's going to be calling the set grip method. So if it's 0, it's just going to keep setting the grip to 0, and then nothing's going to happen because the grip current is still the grip target, which is 0. But once we start to move that trigger, that button, that grip, then grip current is going to be different than the grip target, and this method's going to run, but it's going to run multiple times because it's in the update class. And so it'll run as many times as it needs for the grip current to get to the grip target. And then once they're equal again, this if statement won't be called anymore, and it'll just be an empty method. So we don't have the values for the trigger. So we're going to highlight this whole if statement, press Control D. That'll duplicate it. And then we want to change all these grip values to trigger. And we don't have this animator trigger param, so we're going to go up here to the top, duplicate this one, and then rename it to trigger. There we go. Now we should have both the grip and the trigger updating every frame, checking if the current is equal to the target, and if it's not, animating to the target point. Now let's grab the controllers and see if that works. All right, so we're back in Unity. We need to go to the hand controllers and make sure we're setting the hand that we want that controller to control. And then we're gonna go to the hands, make sure the speed is set. I set it to 10, and now let's try this and see what happens. All right, so the left hand works, and it's really slow, and the animation keeps looping, but the right hand does not work, so let's troubleshoot. All right, so the right hand does not have the controller in here for the animator. Let's go to animation, and then drag this hand animator over to the controller. That got disconnected at some point. And the looping issue and the speed issue. So when we'd press the button, it would slowly close and then loop back. So we're gonna click on the animation, close, and uncheck that. And that will cancel the looping animation. And then for the speed, we're gonna go to hand animator, and in the blend tree, we can bump this speed up for each layer to something like 10. And that'll give us a snappy grab. So now let's go back into the scene, hit play, and see what happens. All right. Oh yes, much better. There we go. So now we have our hands, which we can control with the grip and the trigger. And we can still pick things up with the laser pointers. We're gonna do one more thing before we end this video. I wanna add an object that we can pick up, but then the issue is when we pick something up, the object's gonna snap to the pivot point of the hand. So I'll show you that real quick, but we want to remedy that by just hiding the hand for now, because the posing the hand to an object is going to be a whole nother video. For now, we're just going to hide the hand when you pick something up so it doesn't look like the object is inside of the hand. I'll show you what that looks like real quick. As you can see, I can pick up the cube, but it just appears, so the animation still runs, but it just teleports inside of my hand, and we don't really want that. So instead of posing and going through that whole process, the XR Interactor right now doesn't have a good poser option, so we're going to add a simple method inside of the hand class that will just hide the hand when we grab an object. So let's go back to scripts, go into the hand class, and in order to do that, we're going to need a skinned mesh renderer. We're just going to call this mesh. And then unlike the animator, we're not going to require this component because it's not actually going to be on the same game object. It's going to be a child. So mesh get component in children skinned mesh renderer, which means we can't do a require because it's not going to be the same game object, so it's not going to work. All right, so we're going to make a toggle visibility method. This is going to be public void toggle visibility. And then inside of here, we're going to want to take the skinned mesh, the visuals of the hand, and disable them. We still want the interaction to be enabled and all that. We just want to disable the visuals. So now, down in the method, we can take the mesh enabled and switch that to the opposite. So we're going to do mesh enabled. So what this does is just takes whatever value is inside of mesh enabled, flips it on its head, makes it the opposite, and then sets it. So make sure you save, and then we're going to go back to Unity. Inside of the left-hand controller and right-hand controller, we're going to find this ray interactor or direct interactor if you're using that. Go down, and then inside of interactor events, on a select entered, we're going to take this left hand, and then we're going to call hand toggle visibility. And then same thing for the exit. So on select entered and on select exited, we're going to toggle the visibility. Same thing for the right hand controller, but make sure you're grabbing the correct hand and putting it inside of here, or else it'll toggle the visibility of the wrong hand. Now, if we play, when we grab, we can still grab, still operate the fingers. There we go. Now you can see when I grab the object with my hand, it just cleanly disappears, and there's no weird clipping of the two objects. Everything looks fine. And then when I grab, it just re-enables my hand. There you go, we have some working hands now. We can animate our hands, flex them, all that kind of stuff, and I think we have enough to make a game. Do you guys think we should make a game next and do a game instead of a tutorial? Let me know down in the comments, give me some suggestions. I think it'd be fun to recreate like Super Hot or Pistol Whip or something like that, because we have all the mechanics now for a VR game. So let's start making some stuff with all these tools we have now. Definitely subscribe if you want to see that game that we make next, and if you're interested in any more VR tutorials in Unity, I'm definitely going to be putting out some more content at least every week, if not 2 times a week. So jump on the bandwagon, and I'll see you in the next one.